Sådär då. Jag ska alldeles strax byta om till engelska. Jag ska inte byta av kläder, så jag ska byta till engelska. Vi har ungefär en timme framför oss av diskussion om dagens föreläsningar, lite innehållet där. Diskussion om den huvudsakliga frågeställningen runt konferensen eller kompetensutvecklingsdagen idag, alltså fokus på framtidens skola, framtidens undervisning och också kanske vilka steg som man kan ta för att ta sig dit och hur kan man lösa olika problem och hur kan vi använda liksom kompetensen och kunskapen och erfarenheten som sitter här framför oss. Så det är upplägget, och sen efter detta så är tanken att Peyman vill också komma upp på scenen och säga några ord om dagen och sådär. Så jag tänker att vi diskuterar i ungefär en timme, lite knappt, och sen så ska Peyman få avsluta och summera, och så att ni inte liksom springer ut så fort vi har pratat färdigt här. So I will switch to English from now on, and I'm directing myself towards you a little bit, and I will look at you as well. It's a bit confusing, but so we can all agree that education is important. It's been important for a long while, and it will be important in the future as well. And we can also agree on, I think, that a lot of things in education feel a bit mixed up, and we have some difficulties in Sweden, and we have education systems all over the world struggling, or at least we feel as they are struggling. And that is a challenge. And some people claim that education used to be better before, and that we should go back to trying to do more of what the people did in schools a few years back or a long time ago. Some people claim that the changes that we're seeing right now are much more complex, and the world is changing faster. Cultures are changing, ideas are changing, and education must change as well. So my hope today is that this talk with these four people can give us a perspective on a general level, and also maybe a little bit on a more local level in Sweden. So, Richard, you get my first question.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So what can be said to those who think that things were better off before?
It's a false debate. It really is a false debate. Because if you think about the moral responsibility of education and of educators, the moral responsibility of education and educators is to prepare our children for the challenges of their future. That has always been the case, and it will always be the case. And there was a period where some of the critics will tell you the system worked better, because at the time the education system was aligned to the challenges of the world that we were preparing young people for. That doesn't mean I liked it or morally it was right, but it was efficient and it was effective because it was successfully preparing children for the world they were entering into. But what has happened, given the and let's be very clear about this, by the way. We've got to stop talking about 21st century skills like they're a modern invention. We've got to stop talking about preparing children for the 21st century. Here's something to sober all of us. Kids who are starting school this year will be alive in the 22nd century, so we're already historic if we're talking about the 21st century. But what is true, change isn't an invention of the 21st century, none of it is new, but what has happened, partly because of the explosion of technology, is the world's rate of change has accelerated. So the world now is changing faster than ever before in history. And what has happened as a result is the world's moving here and education has stayed where it is. So the gap is widening all of the time. So that to say that the job for us as educators is to return to this halcyon period here would mean that we would have to ignore and retrospectively move all the advances in humanity back. Otherwise, we will continue to be, and I think it was Alvin Toffler that said it, we will elegantly prepare the world of children for a world that no longer exists. So this idea that somehow we go back, I understand the emotional response to that. And the emotional response is whenever people feel threatened or challenged or that they lack control, it's human nature to look back for a period in your own life where you felt stable and safe. So it's why, by the way, for example, the media right now, television, radio, cinema, we're remaking old movies, we're rebuilding old TV shows, because people live in an uncertain time, so what we're doing is feeding them this ideal that somehow in the past things were safer and more secure. Of course, that was never really true. So the point is, the argument I give to those people is, you're not talking about transforming an education system to meet our moral obligation. You are trying to feed your own nostalgia in the hope that somehow it gives us a greater sense of certainty. And unfortunately, that is simply fiction.
Thank you for that. That is a long answer to a really complex question that a lot of people are talking about. And I'd like to clarify some things. I mean, if Richard gave his thoughts on this, and it's perfectly fine for any one of you to raise your hand or to push some ideas into the question as well. Trude, what has happened to the purpose of public education? Are the incentives the same as before?
Well, I think you started off with saying that we all agree on education being important or something like that. I'm not quite sure I agree in that. Learning is important. It's of the essence. Now, education is important if and only if we educate into the world that Richard so well explained. As long as education, and that's what it is now, is a way of transferring my way of life and thinking and expertise into the next generation, my general opinion is we might as well get rid of it because that would be a hindrance rather than a help. So unless we put content into education that actually is, to our best knowledge, what people will need in 30, 40, or 50 years or whatever, we might as well stop doing it because it's just a hindrance. Mm-hmm. Now, public education has been more of a political machine than an actual society builder. So political education is stuck in the grip of the voters. And the problem is that when we started education in Sweden in 1842, the only possibility for us to do that was not to ask the public. Had we asked the public, most parents would have said, no, we don't want that. We cannot go back to that. In one aspect, that was a nice way of running a country. You just did things and people had to accept it. But we can't go there again. So we're stuck with an opinion that, in my view, never again will reach a situation where 51% will grasp the future and say, this is what we will do. So education will deliver on the majority that actually wants their kids to have the same life. Not even they have, but they had. So public education is doomed.
That's very hopeful for all of us. But the interesting thing is that you talk about content of education, then you talk about, if I'm interpreting you correctly, that the content needs to change a bit and it needs to not be just added on. So Malin and Trude, maybe you can discuss this together. Malin, you talk a lot about content, and I mean, a lot of the things you brought up today are crucial, I think, for learning, but also how can you meet with Trude's thoughts about the content? We have some content, we have a lot of content that we're teaching our students, and some of it might be wrong, and some things might need to be changed. And what are the basic thoughts here from you, Molly?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you say we have to provide our students with the content that, to our best knowledge, is what they will need in the future. And then that's really our biggest challenge right now, because only you can look into the future. Most of us can't. I mean, it's really, I think that is a challenge for the schools. What is the content that, I get that you have the answer. but I have a hypothesis first, because maybe there are some people who have the answer. Maybe the market has the answers. Maybe we will ask the industry, what kind of people, what do you want them to know if we are going to make them employable? But my suggestion is that teachers and experts of different subject areas also have some kind of knowledge actually based in something as old and conservative as tradition. I think that maybe it's important to not hang on to all the old content, but to trust that there is something in the core of a subject area that is important to bring out to new students and develop and question also. So, yeah, what do we need in the future?
Good.
Right. Content is maybe a badly chosen word, but a lot of people can see into the future. It's not that magical. Anyone who builds a house, ask NCC or Skanska or whoever, and they will tell you the first thing we have to do is to get ourselves a well underbuilt opinion of what will the property market look like in 20, 30, 40 years. Before we do that, we cannot build a house. And they would laugh, as we all do, at someone saying, I can see into the future, but they would never ever build a house for like 100 million kroner without having a very good picture of what will this city look like 30 years from now, what sort of offices will they need, and so on. So when I say content, it's not about telling kids what the world will look like in 50 years, but to give them the tools to handle change, which is quite sometimes the opposite of knowledge. The tools to handle change. I do appreciate the example with the sun and the moon. I studied physics to start with, and I'm quite convinced that I will die in a couple of decades, and the sun and the moon will be explained pretty much the same as now. Problem is, most of the content in school is not the sun and the moon. Most of the content is how does society work? What do you need to get a job? How important is math? And what sort of math? Is trigonometry more important than algebra and so on? And those things are not fixed. Those things are subject for change. So what we need our kids to actually do is to answer the question now, how would you, in 5 years from now, make sure that your opinion of the sun and the moon still is valid? How do you check that every morning rather than trusting Troed when he told you that the sun is fixed and the earth is rotating, if you get my drift? Now, how do you get your own opinion every morning on this subject?
Okay.
And again, the sun and the moon will be fixed, so let us tell them that and get rid of it. But the rest of it, how do we get a mindset that actually enables them to raise every morning, read the newspaper, and say, oh shit, the world is nothing like it was yesterday. What am I supposed to do about that?
Okay, thank you. Richard?
Yeah, at this point, I feel it's important I drop the name of another celebrity friend, frankly. No apparent reason. I just decided now was the moment to do that. One of the people that I've been lucky enough to spend a little bit of time with over the last few years is a man I'm sure many of you recognize, a guy called Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, the genius who actually built Apple computers. I had exactly this conversation with him, and it's one of those things that I think is the real crux of the debate about the future of education. And it's interesting, by the way, Steve has a lot of expertise, a lot more than you might think, because as well as building a billion-dollar industry that has changed the world, once he left Apple in 1987, spent the next 7 years of his life working as a technology teacher in a local state school. It's not something that's ever been publicly broadcast because it wasn't something he did because he wanted the public to know about it. But teaching happened to be one of his great passions. And when he found himself in the very lucky and extraordinary position in 1987 to pretty much do whatever he wanted to do because money was irrelevant, teaching was what he decided to do. And by the way, his wife, who was the head of the Apple education program in the late 80s, is also a qualified and practicing teacher. So we got talking about this exact issue. And I think his thoughts are very relevant because I would suggest that when you look at a man like Steve Wozniak, what you're looking at is a guy who possesses a mix of unbelievable knowledge and unbelievable skills of the type that you know he will always be ahead of the curve in terms of his thinking, no matter where we are and what times we live in. And he said, very predictably, very Apple-like, some very simple, but I think very challenging things. The first thing he said to me was, Richard, you know, the world when we talk about education seems to get it hopelessly wrong every time. Because when we talk about education, everybody is fixated with content. He said, content is largely irrelevant. He said, nothing I learnt about the career I've had, I learnt at school. I learnt it in my own time. Nobody at school even understood what a transistor was when I was playing with transistors in my bedroom. Nobody. He said, so I was working on stuff that my school was telling me was completely irrelevant. He said, so here's what I've learnt. Content really doesn't matter that much. But he said, I will tell you what matters beyond anything. And he said, this is based on my experience as a child, as a parent, as an employee, and as a teacher. How you learn is the greatest gift we can bestow on anyone. Now, when you unpick that slightly, I think this is where the argument becomes convoluted and misunderstood. Nobody is saying that our children don't need tools in the box. All children need to know how to read and write and do basic and understand basic math and science and core principles. That isn't content. Those are that's skills-related stuff that actually allows an artist to paint a picture. Picasso didn't paint masterpieces by not knowing how paint and the medium worked. He knew profoundly how the basic medium worked, but he wasn't saddled with having to do it the way everybody else did, so his mind then spread to, how can I break the rules and create new ones? Math is the perfect example, by the way. You know, when you think about math, math is badly taught too much of the time because most children grow up thinking math is not creative. In my experience, math is probably the most creative medium of all the mediums we ever encompass at school. You talk to a doctor of pure mathematics and they will tell you, you know if a student has a doctoral ability because they are capable of exploring the beauty of the proof. In other words, they are constantly questioning, constantly curious, constantly breaking rules and trying to reform them. If we fill our kids with too much content and we reward them for the amount of content they can remember, then not only are we doing them a disservice because we're preparing them for a world of content that is no longer relevant, but we're also stopping their curiosity, their creativity, and their ability to question, challenge, break rules, and reform them. So for me, the crux is not what we teach our kids, but how we teach our kids.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
Anne?
Yeah, I want to add to that. Most of the jobs of the future do not exist yet. We cannot say what we need in terms of skills. If you think back to when you were a toddler, machine learning, was that a term? Was that a career? Algorithms, were they big? They were developed in our lifetime. The next generation will have new things. So I think there's a whole load of new careers out there, new skills to be had. But I would also put it to you, what if the child decides? What if the child is the driving force of what they want to learn? What if they come to you and say, well, actually, my interest is in deep learning, machine learning, and you as a teacher don't know what that is, where to start? You can help them, guide them to pick good sources based on your knowledge of how you would go about investigating a new topic. Because that kid, given a little bit of inspiration on how to go find something, will delve way deeper than you can ever go as a taught,
As an instructor.
as an instructor, yeah.
We have a question from the audience from before. I'm not sure when it was sent in, but the question is a bit around this topic, and it's I'm going to send it to you first, Malin, and it's about what can, out of this discussion, what can the teachers and principals do from the perspective we have right now, because we have this system that we have, and we need to do something now. We can't wait for someone to change it. What do you think, Malin?
Yeah, within the system that we have, I think the most important thing right now is to give as much freedom as possible to teachers, actually. Because, yeah, things are going to change. They will, inevitably. But during that time, while they're changing, we have to go into class and have lessons every day. And so our job as a teacher is to be brave, sometimes go around the obstacles, try to choose other paths, but also to develop to the best of our abilities together with each other the knowledge about what we're teaching. I call it content knowledge. I don't dislike the word content, but I don't think we have all the same interpretation of it. But I see it as all the skills that you do within your subject. So freedom to the teachers, and when you ask me what are the principal's job, the school leader's job, give them space, give them trust, and high demands, and say, I'll keep the rest of the world away. I'll keep the school inspection away. I'll keep everyone happy so you can do your job. Actually, I think it's more important than we know. And then, of course, at the same time, we have to see, yeah, the world is changing, and the school will probably change a lot. But if we're talking right now, at this moment, tomorrow at school, this week, what we will have to do, then you have to go out in your classes and together find new ways of listening, interpreting the answers that your students give, and look into those answers. So, and then by all means, let the children choose what they want to learn. But I actually think it's very good to have an expert helping you. So if you're not the expert, try to help them to find another expert. But what the experts have to do is to be teachers as well, and look at the critical aspects of what they're doing wrong. How can I fix that?
Okay. So I will try to get this discussion to be a little bit more about teacher and teacher empowerment. I know, Richard, that you think about this a lot. Yeah. And what can be done from that perspective, that we have a system right now and we need to empower our teachers and our principals?
I think we do, and I think we can look at this one of two ways. We can look at the buildings, and we can say we'd love to do but, or we can look for the spaces and realize that there will always be a frustration, because there's always going to be buildings. And you know, this is, by the way, I believe, touch on this, because I think it's relevant to the context. There will always be a problem with state education that has political control, because the nature of governments is they're temporary. In a democracy, they have 4 to 5 year terms, and they have to demonstrate impact every 4 or 5 years in order to claim re-election. Therefore, policy is never going to be what it needs to be, which is long-lasting culture shift. So there's a clash right there in terms of transformation and sustainable transformation, and what politics needs. That doesn't mean all politicians are evil, it's just the necessity of the world they live in. But, so we as a profession can sit back and wait for permission. It's never going to come. No knight in shining armor is going to ride over the hill going, there's the magic wand, now do exactly what you want. It's never going to happen. So now, controversially, is the time where we as a professional body have to stand up, find the courage, be prepared to collaborate with each other, and more than anything, create our own cultures of action-based research. Our job is to look for the spaces together, to gather people in our team around us who can see similar opportunities, and say, what can we do to exploit that space? Let's create something based on the ideas we have. Let's create something based on our vision for the kind of people we want our students to be when they leave us. And by the way, I think that's a great start point as a professional question. What do we want our students to look like as human beings when they leave us at the end of their journey in our school? Then we go back and we go, so where are the spaces for us to be able to exploit those things and make those things explicit in what we do? But collaboration, action research, sharing, honesty, courage, trust. We can do that now. It doesn't wait. We don't need to wait for anyone to come along and give us permission. We are professionals.
Okay. So, Troed?
I would say that I second that, Richard. I have two suggestions for teachers. One is to decide, each and every one of you, for yourself, whether or not to join into the choir that says the problems in schools will be solved if we get more teachers, better paid, and more time. Because that would be, in my world, to say that the system is functional, but it's underfinanced. Or stand up and say, no, there's a fundamental wrong with the system. We have to redesign it and help politicians and parents realizing that it's not a quantity problem, but a quality problem. That's one thing. The second thing is to be honest and say, teachers love to compare themselves with the medical profession. And there's a lot to be said about that. But the medical profession had been nowhere where it is if it hadn't been for documentation. You have to realize that 20% of all work made in a hospital is documentation, 20%. So it's not about doing research here and there, it's about every doctor writing down every prescription, every symptom, everything, every meeting, so that the total profession of medical science can see what have the world done to diabetes patients? What have the world as a total done to people with this syndrome? And of those 100,000 that got this preparation, how many got better, how many get worse? So if the school wants to be, educational system wants to be research facility for real, teachers will have to realize that that means that you will spend 20% of your day, every day, writing down what you did, what you saw, what diagnosis you put, what sort of treatment you put into a kid and whether it worked or not and how you measured that. That's the only way you can put education in some sort of science sector that parallels the medical science. And right now we have this discussion whether or not teachers should document what they do and sit down at the desk and write down things. And teachers tend to say, no, we don't want to do that, we want to teach. Okay, fine, but then you will never ever come to the research point that is needed to find better ways forward.
Okay. I think that's interesting, and I will let some of you in just a moment, because teachers have many things to do, right? And some say that we have this discussion on if we are supposed to write everything down and we are supposed to analyze it and then make some changes. And Malin, you talked about different methods of evaluating and developing teaching, and all of this takes time. And there are some ideas that say that we should remove some of the lesson times for the students in order to get teachers time to focus on developing education and teaching. And some say that, oh, no, that's not the issue. We need to add more hours in math and so on. So it's just a comment. Anne?
Yeah, my advice is disrupt yourself before somebody comes and disrupts you. And the examples are all around us. If you think about Uber, the taxi company, owns no cars, yet has a very powerful network driven by big data. Data gives you feedback. You, as the passenger, give feedback to the company whether the drivers are worth taking a risk on. The drivers also give you feedback or give the company feedback on how quick they go from one place to another. I mean, the systems are here. I think the challenge for you as the teachers and the principals is to say, okay, where in this amazing amount of information that you can tap into, even without you entering the data, because the data is out there. If you did a trending Twitter feed about what kids say about the school as school finishes, it'd be amazing what you get back in terms of mood boards, in terms of things they learned or not learned or hated or loved. That information is available. And those things as a teacher, I would be interested in, because they tell me, how are we doing? Are we on the money or are we off the money? And where can we tweak it to make it powerful?
So you're bringing up something interesting, technology, and how can we use technology into our advantage? I mean, we're just speaking about empowering teachers and principals. So, and what do you think? Many teachers talk about that they're looking for this perfect spot. They're looking for the edutopia, if you will, where the teaching is adjusted to every individual need in the classroom. What role do you think technology can play here?
I think technology should only ever be an enabler and an information stream. But I think it's the human beings that will define the fine-tuned aspects of it. And the core definition has to come from the student. As a teacher, I think you have an important role in guiding them how to learn, how to discover, and to inspire to go further than what they were able to do. It also means that you need to keep up with technology. And that's a catch-22. You want to be in front of the room and you want to learn. Kids can teach you. Let them. And, flip that side first of all. If I'm stuck, I'll ask a 14-year-old. They guarantee to tell me where I'm going wrong. And, that opportunity is out there for you every day in a classroom. I have to go find them. So, I would say is you need to take the opportunity of what's there. But technology should not be seen as the one-size-fits-all fix. I don't think it works that way. I think technology can enable and can make your message spread wider, give you information that's relevant on which you make new decisions. But if you think technology, games, or gamification is a one thing that you apply once, wrong. Most games have updates on a constant basis. Most games have to be tweaked to keep engaging. And most game preferences from kids will change over time. So the technology will keep changing, that's a given. How you use it and how creative you are with what you have, I think that's where the opportunity lies for educators, both principals as well as teachers.
Yeah, and while we're talking about education and technology, you talk about gamification, and I got a question from the audience where what role can gamification play into raising the results of our students? Can it play a role for a whole school, or is it just for the teacher, or is it on a national level? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it can play a role on every level. I think it starts in even if you give an individual feedback on their performance, they have an opportunity to change their performance. That's the first step. Then if you look at it from a class and a school's level, again, measure against what's happening. You will see pockets and trends and behaviors that are similar. And those you can steer specific resources to. So you may find that people from a certain class are all struggling with the same topic. That maybe people from a certain background are all struggling with the same topic. And that's where gamification can pick up on it and allow you to actually modify it and change the behavior. Can you do one size fits all? Never. But you have maybe several games that you can engage children with in order to get them to that next level. And at a national level, I think it becomes exciting.
Can I just add in at this point?
Of course.
Some of you might know I was here last night talking to some of the educators of the younger children here. And I want to underline and repeat something I said then, and it picks up on a conversation Ida and I had at lunchtime. You know, one of the things, and by the way, I was never an early years practitioner, but if any of you take the time to go and visit your superb early years education unit, you will see all of this in action in your community now. Early years educators are given a bad rep by a large number of society who think that what they do is they just let kids play in sand. What you will find are some of the most skilled educators anywhere in the world who are already juggling complex curricula, huge levels of need for constant and detailed assessment and testing, in an environment where children are self-managing, self-learning, self-enabled. They use techniques which are incredibly similar to gamification techniques now to motivate and drive their students onto great things. And the question I know I've spoken too much today, but this is a question I hope I can leave you with, which is, and it goes back to something I said right at the start of my speech, I think last night rather than today, is how come we learn 70 to 75% of everything we learn in our lifetime before we're 5 years of age, and then for the rest of the time we're on this planet, which on average is another 70 years, we don't earn as much in the rest of our lifetime, right? So there's a question that we all need to explore. And maybe the answer is already right in front of us. And maybe we should spend more time going to learn from some of our early years education settings and saying, how can we learn from them and apply what's already happening in our school communities? Because this isn't new, this isn't magical, this isn't special, and it's not science. This is stuff that's been happening in good education practice for many, many years. So let's go and explore what we already have, shall we?
Good idea. Malin?
Yeah, I just want to, because what you're saying there is really important. And we have, in Sweden, we have some of the best preschools by all testings, international tests as well, in the world. And the pedagogy there is really good. And we also decided to move the last year of preschool into the same facilities as where we had schools, you know, the year 0, we call it now, before the year 1. And that was in order to make schools, to make our schools get influenced from our preschools. What happened was the other way around. The last year of preschool became an extra school year, so it didn't work. But what they're doing, and what we can do also tomorrow, if we want to, is, I mean, gamification. I think in our subjects, the big questions, the big challenges, those are our games. Those are our interesting questions. You can, if you want to, and if you have the skills, you can build some sort of computer game around it, but you don't have to. You can just gather around and really interesting, important question, like what are we going to do about the climate? How will we take care of all our refugees? What's happening in technology? What will the workforce look like tomorrow? The big, interesting questions. What about art? And they can be our game. It's as easy as that. Also, when I talk about the importance of us tapping into our subject traditions and recognizing the knowledge that they are based on. I don't mean that we have to keep our lessons 40 minutes long or 60 minutes long. We can work together on one issue, one big issue, but we have to know that, okay, now I put on my spectacles as a social scientist, and then I see certain things, and then I become a mathematician and I see certain things, and this is how you do it. But we can work together on that, and that is a game. That is funny in its, or stimulating in itself, and you don't always need to have a point for learning something. If the learning itself actually can be the point of learning.
And it doesn't have to be connected to technology.
It doesn't have to be, but it can be very, very nice when someone who knows how to do it does it.
Yeah.
And it can be absolutely stunning and,
Yeah.
and funny and little Pokemons going around. But even those of us who can't do that, we can start tomorrow.
By changing our teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trud.
I would like to say something on technology, because sometimes we discuss it as if it was something we actually decide what to do or not to do with. Disruptive technology is disruptive whether we pick it up or not. So when the banks were first out telling people that you can make your errands in the middle of the night, they disrupted retail. And retail, selling clothes, had nothing to choose from. They had to either sell clothes in the middle of the night as well, or die. And the time scale was not theirs. Do you see what I mean? So what technology does right now is teach kids a couple of things. Technology teaches kids that you can be 5 kids in a room listening each to your own favorite tune. That's brand new. We couldn't do that when I was a kid. We had to decide what tune to play on the record player, but nowadays you can have your own favorite tune in your ears. Now, that's normal. That normality doesn't disappear just because we say, well, in school we don't work like that. It's normal to do something and get feedback right away. All of you get really angry when you go into a website, order something, and all you get is, we've received your email, we'll answer tomorrow morning. And so that's not reasonable, because you're all used to, if I do something, I want feedback now on my action. And that desire, or almost that's the way things ought to be, doesn't disappear just because my 12-year-old goes into the classroom. When I was 12, I was used to things happened, nothing happened for 3 days, things happened. He's not. So if school is to discuss technology, they will have to start with, what has technology done with this 12-year-old kid before he came to us? And we have to deliver on that, otherwise we will be obsolete. A 12-year-old can sort of be forced to sit still anyway, but he has a mindset that we ought to try to serve, and that mindset is individual. I want my content when I will need it, and it's feedback instantaneously. I don't want to do things on Wednesday and get the answer next Tuesday. That's not reasonable.
Yeah. So I got a question from the audience, and it's about this aspect that you're talking about right now, the instant feedback part. And it's easy to see that the world is changing, and that kids especially are used to having feedback instantly. And can we build a school system around that, or do we need to have get the students to practice more patience? Malin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we can build a school system around instant feedback, because that is what teachers do. Good teachers give instant feedback. I mean, when we talk about formative assessment in Sweden, it has become all these matrix things, and you collect data and you're sitting down and analyze it after the lesson. But it's not what it comes from. It comes from us finding this way of looking into what the kids are doing right now, listening to what they're doing right now, interpreting it, looking for the critical aspects, and doing it as we teach in the classroom. So I think it's already there. I think we are actually trying to destroy that culture by focusing on capturing, to pin it down on paper and structuring it. And we have this, I don't know what the English word for matrice is, the matrix maybe.
Matrix, yeah.
Where we have already decided what kind of qualities are possible for students to show in their answers, and then we have to tick the boxes. But when they show us something that is brand new, that we haven't seen before, there is no box for that. So I think the matrices are really not helping, but we have to be there in the moment. It's not medicine, it's an art form. It's something you do in the classroom. So I can see that. And then, of course, you can do it by digital means as well, but you can also do it very hands-on in the conversations together in the classroom.
Can I just, I also pick up on, I think this is really important, and I think it picks up on the tone of a number of things said, and something Anne said a couple of minutes ago, which is technology is an enabler, human beings will always be at the heart of human relationships. You know, it fascinates me when we suddenly have conversations where we're saying, so will technology allow us instant feedback? Human beings have been giving each other instant feedback since the day we crawled from caves. Teachers have been giving instant feedback since the first time we had a classroom. When I was a teacher, pre-iPads and Wi-Fi and all the rest of it, I was going up to a student looking over his or her shoulder and going, "That's brilliant, well done, you've really improved the quality of your writing today." So let's also remember that we shouldn't be swept along by thinking that technology is sometimes going to mystically enable us to do stuff that we've never been able to do before. And I think this is another very clouding issue within education. And I promise this is my final name drop, right? One of the people I've had the opportunity to have lunch with a couple of times now is Eric Schmidt, the executive chairman of Google. And I asked him the question once, do you ever see a time where technology will replace the teacher? Because I have my own views and I just thought he would have a counter view. And his answer was immediate and unequivocal, and it resonates with what's been said from up here on the stage. He said, no, never. And I thought, wow, this is the executive chairman of Google here. He said, because technology is a tool, it's an incredible catalyst. But education is about the development of human beings. And if you're successfully to educate human beings, that always will require high levels of human interaction. And so this whole idea that instant feedback is something our kids are used to and we don't do it, great teachers have been giving instant feedback to children since the day schools started. Let's not beat ourselves over the head all the time, thinking the answers are always in front of us and they're things we've got to discover and learn about and adopt and anew. Let's sometimes remember that the very greatest skills of a teacher have always been the greatest skills of a teacher and will continue to be the greatest skills of a teacher. And instant feedback for me is one of those great moments where actually technology cannot recreate the kind of human instant feedback that a great teacher gives her or his students every single day.
Okay, Troel.
Now, teachers do give instant feedback. Education doesn't. If I ask any 14-year-old kid, what are you going to do at, or 18-year-old kid, what are you going to do after gymnasium? They say, I'd like to be a civil engineer. Okay, so are you good enough? Will you enter the technical high school, technical university? Are you good enough? Well, I know how good I am, but the system will not tell me whether I'm accepted or not until May, or June, or July. That's not instant feedback. So what are you going to do until July? Nothing. I'm just going to wait for the system to calculate how many applicants are there, how many places do we have, how good are the other applicants. And when they've done all this, and it takes months and months and months, and the computer would do it in 2 minutes. In the midst of summer, I'm going to get a paper in my mailbox telling me whether I was good enough for what I wanted to do, the 3 years in the gymnasium. And that's not instant feedback. The teachers does. Educational system doesn't.
Well, no. Again, I would contest that you're conflating two things there. Education does. The education system doesn't.
Exactly.
A good teacher will give instant feedback on a student's performance and how they improve their performance on a minute-by-minute basis. The system, which is still heavily outcomes-focused and focused on specific outcomes which are chronologically spaced every 3, 4, 5, 6 years in an education system, that is one part of the education system. Education in its form of teaching and learning requires instantaneous feedback. It's the qualifications stuff that is definitely flawed, and absolutely right that the idea that somehow a piece of paper should unlock the door to a child's future and define their choices. But in terms of education itself, great teachers will always and have always given feedback on performance, how to improve your performance,
Definitely.
and rewarding performance in the moment. So I think you're right, but I think we're dangerously confusing two issues here.
Okay.
But I
So
think maybe there is where you can see technology playing a role, though, because technology can gather the data and give that feedback back to the students, to the teachers. And if I, as a student, know mid-year that actually I'm about 10% off what I need in order to get to my preferred place in
Yes.
a particular school, then I can adjust my behavior or look for extra teaching from a teacher that can help me get there. And that's where I think technology has a role to play and where the two can actually merge. Because I think passionate teachers will still teach, will still give instant feedback no matter what. I learned a lot from great teachers and they didn't always stand in front of the classroom.
Pema, can we stretch the discussion for like a few minutes? I think the time is running out. Malin?
I just want to say one thing because I think this is a key point here. And also, I'm a lot on Twitter and I follow the discussions about Troed, for example, and what you say. And we are conflicting school and teachers or the education system and education. Even if our education system will change radically, and even if the schools of the future won't look as they do now, we will always have teachers and we will always need teachers. And teachers are not only people who are good at something, but we also have to be good at teaching that something. It's a special skill. And we will have to have that even if the school system will look totally different, and if people are looking for new knowledge in other ways than by themselves, we will be on the internet, we will be on the communities, and we will design learning tools. So I think there's always going to be a need for people who know how to teach, and that's something else than schools.
Yeah, that's good. To sort of wrap it all up, I'd like to to shift the focus a little bit, and we know that the labor market is changing a lot. I think all people should know that, especially if you're working in education, that the labor market is and has been for a while under great change, and that sort of puts our kids and our students in another situation than we were used to when we went to school, and the whole line of education and work and that chain is not as it used to be. I know we talked about it during the dinner last night. So what do you think about what can you tell kids today that going to school and say what's the point?
My kids ask that all the time. Elder kids have stopped asking me, but I have a lot of answers. But regarding the labor market, I would say that if you want to sort of make it probable that you have a job to go to, and not an employment necessarily, but a job to go to, something that fills you with meaning and gives you bread on the table, you have to realize that you probably will have to create that, whatever it is. Let me elaborate on that just a minute, because we are, and you can be as naive as you want, but we're in a situation where we reasonably can say that whatever we now need can be done almost without labor in 20, 30, or 40 years. So whatever products or services you now put on a piece of paper, I can tell you how they can be produced, delivered, and taken care of the waste almost without people. We have total automatic car manufacturers. We have taxi cars without drivers. You can do almost anything without people. So if you want to answer, what are 7 million Swedes going to do in 40 years? I would say, well, they're going to do a lot of things that we are not doing right now. So who's going to invent them? Waiting for a new Wallenberg or for a new Krüger or for a new brilliant Steve Jobs to give 200,000 Swedes jobs in a new industry we've never heard of? No, I don't think so. I think that most of these people will have nice work, but they will have created the space in which they support themselves within an organization or within the neighborhood or wherever. So you have to sort of be better at finding and creating and establishing something that wasn't neither needed nor understood when you were a kid.
Okay.
Was that, yeah, something like that?
I know that right now in Sweden, the term entrepreneurial learning has a lot of focus, and there's a lot of discussion and a lot of media hype and a lot of people bouncing whether they think it's good or not all over the place. And I absolutely agree, because for me, one of the first things we need to understand is entrepreneurial learning is vitally important, but entrepreneurial learning isn't like feeding the financial beast. It's a misunderstanding. Entrepreneurship is not about teaching kids how to become multimillionaires who avoid tax. That is not what entrepreneurial learning is. Or that's a whole different kind of learning. Entrepreneurial learning is all about the kind of skill sets exactly that you're describing that we need, because the one thing we are moving away from is, and we've all talked about it today, we have to help our kids understand that the idea of a reliable and reliant society where if you do the right things, people will do the right things for you is gone. And so what we have to understand is we have to be far more entrepreneurial personally. We have to be far better, far more curious, far more creative, far more about finding problems and solving problems. We have to be far better at collaboration and far less concerned with competition. And if we can develop those kinds of skills in our kids, they are going to be far better served, because there's no way we can predict what the world's going to be like in 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, let's remember, kids finishing school this year, there was no Google when they started school. That's how quickly the world changes, right? So who knows where it'll go within the time these kids starting school now finish. All we can hope to do is give them the planet of skills and behaviors and attributes that will allow them to take on the challenges of that uncertain and unpredictable world better than we have. And for me, therefore, that whole idea of entrepreneurial learning has to be at the very core of the mindset of educators as we move forward. And we need to unpick this ridiculous idea that somehow entrepreneurship is all about creating greedy multimillionaire tax avoiders. You know, we have to be much smarter and more mature about that conversation.
So to sum it up, we're running out of time. I love this, by the way, asking stupid questions to clever people. You always learn interesting things. But just to send us away here with some ideas, this shift that we're talking about, what for everyone in here, what type of responsibility do we have in that big shift of education and labor market? Let's, Anne, what do you think?
I just want to pick up on something.
Yeah, okay.
It's like, create your own job, create your own future, but also don't make it dependent on one country, one location. And I'm my own case in point on that one. I live in Stockholm. I work out of London. My bank recently asked, where was I emotionally tied to? And I was like, I don't care where I'm emotionally tied to. You just need to manage my money. And, you know, I thought it was an intrusive question. To come back to your question, and to sort of, I think as an education sector, teaching resilience is vitally important, but more than that, inspire and be open-minded. Because the children today will teach you what will come in the future. They'll go to places and they'll take you places where you may not have imagined going. Go with them and also help them to take that first next step to go and explore. Because if you create a confident child, they will explore by nature. It's in their nature. So if anything, if you give them that, I think they'll be ready.
Okay. Malin, do you have some thoughts here?
Yeah, I think our responsibility is to be true to our nature as teachers and educators. I mean, do what grown-ups have done to the young kids always. Teach them everything you know. What you find in your heart is important. And remember that the documents, the policy documents about what we're going to teach, they are political compromises, then they will change. And the only thing we can do to prepare the youngsters is to teach them what we read. This is a way of looking at and handling the world, and it might be efficient. And here you go, I offered this to you, and you try to use it. And the principals, they should give both the students and their teachers that freedom. Then it'll work out.
Ture, do you have something to say about the responsibility of teachers and principals and maybe even politicians?
Help each other and yourself to see the fundamental differences we have to deal with. Entrepreneurial learning is the most important thing. You cannot have that and say, and this is what we want you to learn this year. Help us every day to say, okay, you can have the one or you can have the other, but you can't have both. You can't have entrepreneurial learning and this is what you are supposed to learn this year. Either you say, this is what you're supposed to learn, that's not entrepreneurial, or you say, this is entrepreneurial learning, I have no idea what you know, what you learned the year to come. And there are a lot of dualisms like this in the school system, and we need to talk about and not necessarily decide what, or blame the other half, but make sure that it cannot be done, both of them. We can't have individual learning and all kids are going to have the same amount of hours in maths or Swedish or whatever. And someone has to, and that's a profession, has to stand up and say, you can't have both. Either we are to learn kids math on an individual level, and then they will have a different amount of hours, or they will have the same amount of hours and they will reach different places. Either we have entrepreneurial learning, that is students who actually take responsibility for the content and what they do, and they will end up in different places all over the map. Or we want them all to end over here, and then we should stop talk about this entrepreneurial thing. And help us sort of sort this so we get professional discussion rather than can't we have it all and all be friends.
Thank you. So I will welcome Peyman back on stage. And while his works his way up here, I will try to sum up all of your ideas. It's not going to be easy. But you talk about the teachers will matter in the future. They matter now and they will matter in the future as well. You talk about that we can't always sit tight and wait for the politicians to make up new systems. We need to try to change things from within the system all the time. And you talk about technology playing a part with gamification and instant feedback as a support for the teachers, formative assessment and so on.
Can I just interject and finish with one final warning? Because,
Okay.
you know, I come
Run
from
away.
over the water. Right, everything is vital. Collaboration and global citizenship are the future. You know you are going to have a failing education system in Sweden if your country at a time of collaboration and global citizenship votes for Brexit. So don't listen to British educators ever again.
A round of applause.
Great, thank you. Now I know that my staff is fearing a PowerPoint with 100 slides from me, but you won't get that this time. I'm here to point my greatest thanks to you all. Thank you very much for being here. Oscar, Richard, Anne, Malin, and Trued. You will get some memories from us that you will probably burn up later. It's actually candlelight, that's why. It's handmade, actually. So this is memories from High Coast, and we hope that you will remember us a little longer than these hours have been. Great. The most important part of the thing I always think about when we talk about education and the things we have done, and I get a little emotional about it too, is the school culture. That's the thing that's going to make it possible for us to do stuff. And you who listened very carefully, Malin said break more laws. In her own words. Did you hear?
I tried not to
Did
say
you hear? We have it on tape. We have it on tape. Rewind. We'll see.
I actually think that we have to be more what do you call it? Unobedient. We have to,
Yeah.
break more laws.
Disobedient.
Disobedient.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Very good. That's the final word from today. We will thank Ida, the film crew, technicians, Ingela, and everybody that has been helping for making this day happen and be this successful. Thank you very much to you all. Thank you.
Thank you.